Have you ever almost quit a job even though you were winning? Early in my career, I turned a property around from 150 vacant units to about 10 vacant units in 4 months. And I still ended up putting in my 2 weeks notice. That next day, the owner of the company drove 3 hours to my property just to ask me not to leave. And what he said to me that day changed how I understood leadership forever. Welcome back to Breaking Barriers. I'm Sheila Greene, industry leader, speaker, CEO in affordable housing. And today I want to talk to you about a story from earlier in my career that still shapes the way I lead today. Now, this happened when I was working for a family-owned property management company. It was a baseball family, and the father started the company and brought his kids in. But the father had real industry experience. He came up through the ranks and worked for some of the biggest national management companies and just had some great operational wisdom that comes from somebody being in the business for a long time. But eventually, he did step back and handed the company over to his kids to run. And as many of you know, when leadership transitions like that happen, the culture of a company can change pretty quickly. At the time, I was managing one of the company's properties that was an absolute distressed property. It had a serious vacancy problem. We're talking around 150 vacant units, and anyone who works in property management knows that's not a small issue. That's a crisis. So the team and I got to work. We got a leasing strategy. We changed our marketing. We went to our residents and said, what is it that you need from us? What can we do to make your experience better? How can we help out with our maintenance? Getting the property turned around is no small feat. And a lot of it for me was really listening to prospects, employees, and the residents. And in about 4 months, the property went from 150 vacant units to about 10. That was one of the biggest turnarounds I had ever been a part of. But despite the results, the leadership environment was difficult. In managers' meetings, there was a pattern. Instead of recognition for progress, there was a lot of public criticism. Comments made in front of peers, corrections in meetings rather than coaching in private. And it wasn't just me. A lot of the team experienced it. Over time, that kind of an environment, it wears on you and your employees. It affects morale, it affects confidence, and eventually it made me question whether or not I should stay. So after about 2 years with the company, I decided it was time to move on. I put in my 2 weeks notice. The next day, something happened that I never would have expected. The owner of the company, the father, drove 3 hours to my property. He didn't call, he didn't email, he drove 3 hours just to talk to me. We walked the entire property together and we had a conversation. He asked me not to leave. And during that walk, I asked him something that had been bothering me for a long time. I said, if I'm doing such a bad job according to your daughter, then why do you want me to stay? And his response stuck with me. He said something very simple. He said, she's still learning how to lead. Then he asked me a question. Are you really going to let someone else run you off when you're winning? That question stopped me in my tracks. That moment taught me a few things about leadership that I will carry it forever. I carry it with me to this day. Lesson 1 was not every difficult leadership situation is about your performance. Sometimes leaders operate from insecurity, ego, fear, inexperience. Sometimes it's all of it. And when someone is still figuring out how to lead, it can come out in ways that feel discouraging or diminishing to the people around them. Results still matter. If you are doing the work and producing results, someone is paying attention. Even if the recognition isn't coming from the person directly above you, someone is paying attention. And don't let someone else's leadership journey derail your own. I could have walked away from that job, but instead I stayed for 9 years. And those 9 years shaped a huge part of my career. It made me tough. It made me realize that I could shoulder the burden and keep negativity from my employees so that they're still able to accomplish the goals we have set out. So what's interesting is that today I now sit in the same position that the father was sitting in. I run a company, I develop leaders, and sometimes I see people who are still learning how to lead. And I also see incredibly talented employees who might feel discouraged by the process. That experience taught me something really important. One insecure leader should never have the power to change the trajectory of someone who's doing great work. I'll never forget that conversation, because sometimes leadership isn't about a big speech or a grand gesture. Sometimes leadership simply is recognizing someone's value and making the effort to keep them. And in that moment, that's exactly what he did. He drove 3 hours to remind me that my work mattered, and that's something I'll never forget. Leadership isn't just about the people who follow you. It's about the people you decide are worth fighting to keep. Thanks for listening to Breaking Barriers in Property Management. Don't forget to like and follow my social media. Check out the captions for the links.